All right, so let's jump into cybersecurity today and talk about a company that's been, making a lot of noise lately, CrowdStrike. Now, if you're like me at all, you're always looking for those, those companies that look promising for your portfolio, your investments.
Yeah.
So today's big question is CrowdStrike going to be that next big winner? We've got two sources to help us with this today. One is some background on CrowdStrike itself, and the other is, it's an article by Jim Cramer, and he's urging investors to basically to buy CrowdStrike stock.
Yeah, and what I find so interesting about CrowdStrike is that they're not your typical antivirus company, They've even been called a digital special forces unit.
Whoa. Okay.
And that's not just some, hype. It's that they are all about stopping breaches before they even happen, which is pretty game-changing these days, with all these cyber attacks getting more and more complex.
Okay. I'm intrigued now. Digital Special Forces Unit. That does sound pretty intense. How do they actually pull that off? The stuff we have here talks about their approach.
Well, it all comes down to their platform, the Falcon platform. It's cloud-based, and it uses AI and machine learning that's constantly scanning for threats. So instead of just reacting to viruses that are already known, they're actively hunting down anything that looks the least bit suspicious.
Hold on. AI that hunts down hackers. That sounds like something straight out of a movie. Can you break that down for me? Like, how does that even work?
Okay, think of it this way. They have this huge database. They call it the threat graph, and it's always collecting data about cybercrime. That's everything from malware signatures to, the tactics hackers use, all of it. And this lets the AI analyze all this for patterns so it can actually predict attacks.
So they're not just relying on those virus definitions that are always outdated. They're using AI to find threats we've never even seen before. That's got to be a big deal, especially for people like me who aren't really tech experts, but who want to make sure our investments are safe.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having a team of, the best cybersecurity people constantly monitoring your systems 24/7. But instead of, humans, it's actually algorithms and machine learning doing all the work.
Okay. Yeah, I see why they're called the Digital Special Forces Unit now. But before we get too carried away, tell me about the people behind this. Who are they? What makes them, credible?
One of the co-founders, Dmitry Alperovich, is a pretty big deal in cybersecurity. He actually co-founded McAfee's threat research division.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that McAfee with those pop-ups?
Oh, yeah?
Those antivirus ones?
Okay.
So he definitely knows a thing or two about stopping cyber threats.
You're right. I mean, those pop-ups, you either loved them or hated them, but they were a constant reminder that someone was trying to protect our computers.
Exactly. And even just the name CrowdStrike itself is interesting. It reflects how they believe in collective defense. The idea that we can all fight cybercrime better if we work together and share threat intelligence.
That makes a lot of sense, with everything being so interconnected these days. Yeah. You get a cyber attack in one part of the world, and it can cause problems everywhere.
Right. And that focus on preventing things, instead of just finding them after the fact, is really what makes them different from all those other antivirus companies.
Okay.
CrowdStrike isn't just about telling you have a problem, it's about stopping it from even starting.
Now, that sounds great in theory, but is any system truly foolproof? I mean, even the best companies, they made mistakes.
You're right. And that leads us to an interesting part of CrowdStrike's story. Just last year, they had a big software update that, it didn't go so well. It caused some major outages for their customers.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. A software glitch at a cybersecurity company, that's got to be a PR nightmare. So how did they handle all of that? Because as an investor, that's a red flag for me.
Oh, yeah.
It makes you question if they're really reliable.
I understand. You're right to be cautious. But the interesting part is how they handled it. They didn't try to downplay it or anything like that. They took responsibility, and they worked really hard to fix it. And the whole time, they were totally open with their customers about what was going on.
So they took responsibility and were honest. Okay, that's good. But did it hurt their business? Did they lose customers?
They lost some, but most stuck with them, which tells you a lot about the trust they've built and how they're committed to making sure their customers are happy.
So they messed up, but recovered. That kind of resilience is something I look for in my investments. It shows they can handle the tough times and come out stronger.
It really speaks to the strength of what they're offering and the relationships they have with their customers.
Okay, so we've got this innovative approach, and they seem to have bounced back from a big mistake. But how are they doing financially? Because, at the end of the day, it's what matters most to me as an investor.
Well, let's talk numbers then. CrowdStrike isn't just surviving, they're doing great. Last year, they had over $3 billion in revenue.
Seriously?
Yeah, and that's 36% higher than the year before.
36% growth. Wow, that's impressive. But revenue is just part of the picture. What other key metrics should I be looking at as an investor?
Well, there's their annual recurring revenue, or ARR. It's basically the predictable revenue from their subscriptions. And CrowdStrike's ARR hit $3.44 billion.
Okay, so this ARR number, why is that important to me as an investor?
It shows you that CrowdStrike isn't just making one-time sales. Their customers are signing up for the long haul for these subscriptions. So that means more predictable revenue and a stronger foundation for future growth.
Okay, that makes sense. Having consistent revenue is always a good sign. Now, after that software issue, their stock took a hit. Has it recovered?
It has. The stock has bounced back pretty strongly, actually. That suggests investors still believe in their potential, long term. And that brings us to Jim Cramer and his very strong endorsement of CrowdStrike.
Ah, yes, Jim Cramer. Always the life of the party. So what does he have to say?
He's pretty much shouting buy, buy, buy. He's especially impressed with CrowdStrike's CEO, George Kurtz, and thinks the company's in a great position to keep growing.
Buy, buy, buy. You gotta love Cramer's enthusiasm. But he tends to get excited about a lot of companies. What's making him so bullish on CrowdStrike specifically?
He sees them as a leader in a market that's growing rapidly. Cybersecurity is only getting more and more important, and Cramer thinks CrowdStrike is in the perfect spot to benefit from that trend.
So we've got this glowing recommendation from Cramer, but he's just one guy. What do other analysts think?
I always like to get a, more balanced view before making any decisions about my investments. You're right, it's good to be thorough. Let's see what some other opinions are and get a sense of the broader market sentiment. So we've got CrowdStrike's take, and even Jim Cramer's. But what about other experts? What do they think? That's important for, getting the whole picture. One firm, Wedbush Securities, they think that less than 5% of CrowdStrike's customers probably left after that whole software update mess last year.
5%, that's not a lot when you consider how bad it could have been.
Yeah.
It's like they really did damage control pretty well.
But then there's Fidelity Growth Strategies Fund. They got rid of their CrowdStrike stock over the summer, and they specifically said it was because the stock dipped after that software problem.
So we've got some mixed signals here. Some people are optimistic and others are being more cautious. As an investor, that just makes me want to dig even deeper. What else should I be thinking about when it comes to CrowdStrike and their future?
Well, remember how we were talking about how they're not just doing endpoint security anymore? They're getting into cloud security identity protection. They want to be like a whole cybersecurity ecosystem.
Yeah, but is that spreading themselves too thin? Could it take away from what they're good at, that endpoint security? Should I be worried about them, taking on too much too fast?
It's definitely something to watch, but you also have to think about the bigger picture. Cybersecurity is always changing. These attacks are getting crazier and happening more often. So companies need a whole package of security solutions now.
So they're trying to be like the one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs.
Yeah.
Makes sense for them as a business, but how do they actually compare to their competition? Isn't that market already pretty crowded?
It is a competitive space, but CrowdStrike's focus on that, proactive threat hunting thing we were talking about, and using AI and machine learning, that gives them an edge. Remember the threat graph? That's their secret weapon, right? It's always learning, always getting better. That's what makes them better at stopping attacks before they happen. The other guys, the antivirus companies, they're mostly just playing catch up.
Okay, but how does all that technical stuff actually help their customers in the real world? Because that's what creates value, right? For the company and for investors like me.
For one, their customers don't get attacked as much. Their whole thing is about stopping the attacks before they can do any damage. That means less downtime, fewer disruptions, less money lost for businesses.
Yeah, because just one cyber attack can ruin a company. We see it all the time, especially now that everything's digital.
Exactly. And it's not just about blocking the attacks. CrowdStrike helps companies handle things better if there is an attack. Their platform gives all this detailed information so security teams can figure out exactly what happened, who did it, and how to stop it from happening again.
So it's not just stopping the bad guys. It's also learning from every attack to get even better.
That's it. And this approach, being proactive and really analyzing everything, that's super valuable for businesses. And that makes them more valuable for investors too.
Okay, so we've talked about their technology, their competition, how they help their customers.
Yeah.
But what about that software update problem last year? How did that affect their reputation, their relationships with their customers? Because that's what ultimately affects their bottom line and my investment too.
It's a good question. It was a setback, but it's how they handled it that matters. Being transparent and taking responsibility was key. They admitted the mistake, fixed it quickly, and were open with their customers the whole time.
And they kept most of those customers even after messing up so publicly.
Yeah.
That says something about the trust they've built. It shows that they can admit when they're wrong and come out stronger because of it.
Exactly. It shows how strong their customer relationships are. They didn't try to hide it. They faced it head on, and I think that earned them even more respect.
They had a challenge, learned from it, and came back stronger. That's definitely a good sign for a potential investment. But what about the future for CrowdStrike? Where do they go from here? What should I be watching for as an investor?
They're always innovating and coming up with new things. They don't just want to be the best at endpoint security. Now they're going into things like cloud security and identity protection. Remember that cybersecurity fortress we talked about? They're building that.
Yeah, constantly coming up with new things. It's super important in cybersecurity. Everything's changing so fast. So how are they using technology to stay ahead of the game?
AI and machine learning are going to be even more important for them moving forward. Cyber attacks are getting more automated and more complex. And CrowdStrike wants to be the leader in this, this technological arms race.
So they're not just reacting to threats, they're trying to shape the future of cybersecurity. But like any investment, there are risks. What are some challenges CrowdStrike might face in the next few years?
Well, the competition in cybersecurity is really tough. There are new companies all the time. CrowdStrike has to keep innovating and being different to keep their spot in the market.
And then there's all the global stuff going on. Cyber attacks are being used more and more in conflicts and espionage. That makes things even more complicated and risky.
That's right. If you're going to invest in cybersecurity, you have to understand not just the technology, but the global politics, too. It's always changing, never a dull moment.
Okay, we've talked about a lot today, from their technology and how well they're doing financially to the competition and the risks they're facing.
We have. And in the last part, we'll break all this down into some key takeaways to help you decide if CrowdStrike is a good fit for your portfolio.
All right, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive into CrowdStrike. We've looked at their tech, their financials, the competition, even that software update thing from last year. Now let's get to the point. Should you as an investor think about adding CrowdStrike to your portfolio?
The million-dollar question, right? So let's go over what we've learned. CrowdStrike has a different way of doing cybersecurity. They focus on stopping threats before they happen, not just reacting to viruses everyone already knows about. And they have that Falcon platform, remember? With the AI and machine learning that never stops analyzing and predicting attacks.
And they're not stopping there. They're moving into new things like cloud security and identity protection.
Sure.
Trying to be that one-stop shop for all your security needs. Plus, they seem to have recovered pretty well from that software update mess. Shows they're tough.
Right. And their numbers look good. Over $3 billion in revenue, 36% growth compared to last year, and a solid ARR of $3.44 billion. Any investor would be happy with that.
We also had Jim Cramer basically telling everyone to buy. But we also heard from some other analysts who were a bit more cautious. So it's not a sure thing, right? There are things to think about.
Definitely. Cybersecurity is super competitive. New companies are popping up left and right. CrowdStrike can't just sit back. They have to keep innovating if they want to stay on top. And like you said, there's all the global stuff to consider too. Cyber attacks are a part of global politics now, which is unpredictable.
So it's a mixed bag, like a lot of investments. There could be big rewards, but there are risks too. What would you say are the most important things for an investor to consider when deciding about CrowdStrike?
I think the first thing is, how much risk are you comfortable with? Are you okay with investing in a market that's moving this fast and always changing?
Cybersecurity is not for the risk averse.
Right. You also have to look past all the hype and really understand CrowdStrike's technology. Do you think it's a good approach? Do you think that AI platform will still work as threats get even more advanced?
Because if their technology can't keep up, they're in trouble.
Exactly. And don't forget about the basics, the financials. Look beyond just the revenue growth. What about their profits, their margin? How's their cash flow? Are they building something sustainable, or are they just spending a ton of money to grow fast?
All important questions. So it sounds like deciding on CrowdStrike isn't just a yes or no thing. There's a lot to think about. It comes down to your own goals as an investor and your risk tolerance.
Yeah, there's no right answer for everyone. But hopefully this deep dive has given you the info you need to make a good decision.
I know I've learned a lot. From digital special forces to AI hunting down hackers to global risks. Quite a ride. But that's what's so interesting about investing right. It's about exploring new things, weighing the good and the bad, and ultimately making choices that fit your financial goals.
Well put. And remember, cybersecurity is always changing. Even if you decide CrowdStrike isn't right for you right now, it's worth keeping up with what's going on in this field. Who knows what cool new tech and new investment opportunities will come up in the next few years.
And that's it, folks. Our deep dive on CrowdStrike. We covered a lot, but like always, the learning doesn't stop here. Keep learning, exploring, and making those portfolios grow.